Hello, readers. Welcome back to Reading in the Middle, the podcast where we celebrate all things middle grade. I'm your host, Anisha Jeffries, Youth Services Manager at the Cleveland Public Library. I am so thrilled to bring you an exciting conversation with the one and only Johnnie Christmas. Johnnie is a #1 New York Times bestselling graphic novelist and the author of Gamerville. His 2022 middle grade graphic novel debut, Swim Team, earned a spot on the National Book Awards long list and a Coretta Scott King Award Illustrator honor, among many other prestigious accolades. On this episode, we'll dive into Johnnie's creative journey, the inspiration behind his incredible stories, and what's next for him in the world of middle grade literature. Let's get started with this amazing conversation. Hi, Johnnie. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Anisha?
Oh, I'm great as well. Thank you so much for joining us and Reading in the Middle. And I just want to, again, thank you so much because you have two great graphic novels that I want to discuss with you. And I don't know where to begin, but I'll start off by asking you if you could share how you start as a storyteller. Did you always know you wanted to write and illustrate graphic novels?
Yeah, I think I started off mostly just drawing and really enjoying that as a little kid. And then pretty soon, by definitely by high school, I was very much in love with the form of comics and graphic novels. And at that point, most of my drawing from that point on was to service stories that I was coming up with. And I find that even now, I mostly draw for story. Like I don't like draw turtles in my sketchbook just for fun or whatever. Like if I'm drawing a turtle, it's because there's like I'm designing a turtle or something. So yeah, it happened pretty quickly. I remember there being a time where it was just drawing, but and writing being something that I did independently, just prose. But when they came together, they've been pretty closely paired ever since then.
Yeah, I absolutely loved both Swim Team and Gamerville. And I want to know what
Thank you.
inspired you to write both graphic novels, and did personal experiences or observations spark these stories?
Yeah, absolutely. They did personal experiences. When I was a kid, I was very much I love video games, and I would play all the time, but I would get dizzy while playing them. So after a while, I had to stop playing them because I was just getting way too dizzy. But I often thought about like, oh, if I what would happen if I would have kept up with video games? Like, would I have even become a graphic novelist? I'm not sure. So the seeds for Gamerville started right around that kind of idea. The idea, but the seeds for a swim team came even earlier. When I was 5, I almost drowned in a swimming pool, and it set off this kind of bad relationship between me and swimming that continues to this day. Now I've done adult swim classes and all that, but the fear is still there, you know. Um, so no matter how technically I have it down, like I'm still, if I can't touch the bottom, I start freaking out a little bit. Uh, Interestingly enough, the seeds for both of the books kind of were always there, and I didn't know I was going to tell stories about them until much later. I remember with Swim Team, I would do all these different versions of it. Like it was like the story kept trying to come out in a different way, and I'd do like an 8-pager or with like different, like sometimes starring me, you know, with like just straight up autobiographical, and then but the first one I pitched was actually Gamerville. And no, actually, I pitched Swim Team like years before, but a different version of it. And a few years later, I went back to doing some adult stuff, like for the adult market. And then I pitched a Gamerville. And then as I was going around, there were folks who were like, "Hey, what happened to that swim book that you were pitching? Like, do you still want to do that one?" So then I pitched them both, and then Harper happily published both, with Swim Team coming first in the line of two.
Love. I mean, when I tell you after reading both books, it was very inspiring. And I know our listeners, for those of you that haven't read Swim Team or Gamerville, you need to drop everything. Just turn this podcast off right now, drop everything, and then read it, and then come back because it has so many just wonderful characters. And one thing I know about Swim Team, you have it tackles themes of diversity and inclusion in swimming. What drew you to this sport and its cultural implications? I know you talked about
Well,
when you were a kid, but I mean, can
mhm.
because it is like you don't see that many, African Americans in the sport.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, when I was a kid, when I fell into the pool, I thought it was I thought it was all my doing. Like I thought it was entirely my fault that that I didn't know how to swim at that age. And it was only after when I started talking about the book and trying to do a version of it and doing research, I started noticing the stats of actually how many African American children uh die of drowning in swimming pools. It's an alarming amount. And then anecdotally, when one is working on a graphic novel, it takes quite a bit of time. So your friends are always naturally asking, "Hey, what are you working on?" So tell them, and they'll go, "Oh, that's interesting. That happened to me, or that happened to my cousin, or that happened to my mom, or the kid down the street." Like almost every Black person I spoke to had a story, of someone they knew, if not them directly. And that's when I started realizing, anecdotally and statistically, just how big the problem was. And that the story that I was trying to tell about, a kid who almost drowns and joins a swim team was actually a story about access.
Hmm.
And when I look back on my neighborhood growing up, I couldn't tell you where the swimming pool was. I don't think we had one anywhere near. All the kids in my neighborhood, we played basketball or football, but we didn't swim. That was not part of our childhood life. That was not part of our discussions. That was not part of the things that we did over the summer. It just wasn't, because we didn't have a pool. It was just a story of access. And meanwhile, this is Florida, right? So it's the peninsula. We're surrounded by water. But when you're a little kid, driving to the beach, you need a car. So yeah, so the story kind of it started from very much like in the book. Bree asks the question from like a child's perspective. Well, why don't I know how to swim? Or why don't my friends know how to swim? And then Miss Etta answers from the adult perspective of, well, this is what's going on. So Bree asking the question was kind of how it started the book. Like me, actually, the child inside actually asking the question. And then me, who did all the research, was kind of Miss Etta answering that question for myself and for the readers.
Wonderful. And so you have Bree, and then that's in Swim Team, and then in Gamerville you have Max, and he's such a dynamic character as well. How did you develop the story about his lone wolf personality?
Yeah, interestingly enough, the book changed quite a bit from inception to making, and then changed again and changed again. So at a certain point, the book was conceived obviously before COVID, but at a certain point when I was working on it, we're still in lockdowns and such. So when kids were starting to return to school, and I started thinking about, like, well, what kind of kid who already is kind of has a tendency to be alone and kind of have mostly online friends. Like, what does this pandemic and the social isolation that came along with it, how would that affect a kid like Max? So that really helped inform Max in a way that supercharged his lone wolf sort of persona. And later versions, as the book was worked on, the COVID angle was removed. The outlook that Max had from writing it, thinking of it that way, remained, which was really helpful because it really helped clarify that sense of, like, he didn't know that he was really missing anything. He kind of sensed it, but he was fine. Like, oh well, I'll win at Gamerville and I'll get all the friends in the world because I'll be like the best champion at this game. That happens to be called the Lone Wolf of Calamity Bay. So that's kind of how the formation of Max's character was formed, and then put that in stark relief with a summer camp where all the kids don't have technology while there, and they're just kind of all over each other, interacting with each other and each other's business, playing games together in the real world, which of course is the worst place on earth for Max. From his point of view, it's just like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. And seeing how he interacts with this whole new world that he's thrown into.
It's almost like Max going into a time machine and going back to like the 70s and early 80s, before, we had games and social media. And it would seem like Camp Reset would be like the ultimate nightmare, for a gamer, but about connections. There's always like in your both of your books, there's this theme of connection. But Gamerville explores the importance of human connection and community. Why did you feel this theme was important to young readers today?
It's a good question. You know, interestingly enough, I rarely, if ever, think about theme when I'm writing. When I start writing, I always think about character. Like, all right, okay, like what kind of this character, if they were put in this situation, what would happen? And then I find that the theme expresses itself through the telling. And a lot of times I don't even know what it's about. I notice it. And then once I notice it, then I'll double down and add a little bit more to like, okay, well, I'm obviously talking about connection again, like for whatever reason. Okay, how do I heighten that? So it does seem to be something that I'm interested in. And I couldn't tell you why beyond just kind of, that I'm a human and then human connectivity is very important to us humans here on this earth. But yeah, I think about it and I'm glad that that's a theme that's coming up, 'cause since I'm not looking to create themes as I'm going, you know, goodness knows what could come out. So I'm glad it's connection and not like something horrible. But yeah. So and it fits with what the characters are looking for in both of these stories and with their communities and these characters at a certain point, certainly Max, feels very much alone. And only through walking through the story does he and even Bree to some extent realize that they're not alone. They're actually surrounded by people all the time, people who are looking out for them, people who care about them, and people who want the best for them and for them to actually enjoy themselves as well, right? Like not just the best for you, even though it hurts, but like you can have a great time and it can be good for you. So yeah, I don't know why, but there it is.
Well, with Max, also with Brie, but with Max, were there any other characters based on people you know or specific personality traits that you observed that you included in both books? Specifically, I guess Gamerville, I would say.
Yeah, well, with Max, it started with like I was like that hunger that I had as a video gamer as a kid, and that compulsive, desire to play. And of course, Max's parents were pretty much the mom in particular was kind of like a stand-in for my mom. Like my mom worked a lot, so she didn't really see just how much I was playing. So she didn't like, she was just more about concerned about us like playing and watching TV and stuff like in general. But she wasn't watching like hour after hour, like, oh my goodness, you guys are playing a lot. But she did have concerns and she did voice those concerns. So the mom character is very much colored by that interaction with my mom when I was a kid. And as for the other characters, like Zanzi in particular was mostly created as a stark relief character. So not really based on anyone, but just kind of thinking, all right, well, what if I was someone whose great great grandfather, great grandfather, I forget how many greats, formed the camp 100 years ago, and it was like not only the family business, but the family. It was almost like if you could have a coat of arms, but you wore it on your heart, that's what it is. Like the great outdoors and the natural world, and being part of this great tradition of Camp Reset, and that all came out of like, okay, like Max is alone in his room again, playing this game
Hmm.
again. And then Zanzi, what would that look like if you had the exact opposite, just always connected with folks, but connected with folks over time, like over a course of a century of this, right? Like a stew, kind of
Yes.
like cooking, it's just like, it's so rich, the connection and the traditions of the camp
Hmm.
versus this very new thing that Max bought the game, who knows, a year ago, but this has been his culture for a year or whatever, right? However long.
Right.
Zandy, it's been a culture before she even stepped onto the face of the earth. So I just like playing with the juxtaposition between the two.
Well, being both writer and illustrator, that's a juggling act for you. How do you decide which parts of the story to show visually versus narratively?
That's a good question. The story kind of decides that. So I will write a bunch of, as I'm writing, I can see images. So, which helps with the editing right away because I know, like, okay, well, I don't need to write that because I'll show it, or I don't need to say that because it'll be seen. But even then, even going in with that sort of first edit as I'm writing, once I start drawing, I start cutting all sorts of stuff that I've written because then I really, really see it. And
Hmm.
when I'm throwing a character in the background, I'm like, oh, right, I don't need this person to call back to that character in the background and say, hey, do you see this thing? Oh, no, actually, the way I drew it, they can see it just fine. So I could cut that, I can cut this, and then the story starts getting much more streamlined and much more propulsive. I like a nice propulsive kind of story where kind of pushes the reader forward and you're moving forward. And by cutting story, not story, but words and description, because the pictures carry so much, that does a great job of it. So yeah, the words come first, but then the pictures kind of take over everything. It's almost like making the book all over again once the images start,
Mm-hmm,
because
mm-hmm.
then it's a whole different thing. Like when I'm writing in words, I'm writing for my future self, like so that I don't forget something. But then when the future self comes along, they've been thinking about it. So me, the future me, has been thinking about it so long, even in the back of my mind, that I'm just like, okay, like the system gets more efficient, the story gets more efficient. Okay, I don't need that. I don't need this. Or maybe I should change that up entirely. Or I can say this through a visual motif, this whole entire passage. I could just show a cave that's dark with a light glinting from the bottom. Okay, all that description I had about, black holes and,
Okay.
asteroid belts and all that, whatever. I could drop all of that because it's very evident from the images.
Yeah, so both Swim Team and Gamerville focus on personal growth. What's one lesson you hope readers carry with them after reading these books?
That's a good question. I think I'm thinking about it now. I think probably being true to oneself and to one's own uniqueness. We're all individuals, and we all have our own unique way of doing things. And I think the more that we embrace that, the more that you find these very interesting innovations on little things. We're not talking about, you don't have to reinvent the smartphone in terms of innovation. I mean, just innovation and the way you communicate with your family, within your family system, or how you you know uh might draw something or say something, turn of phrases that you use. Actually embrace the quirky things that you do, because you could actually build on those and become more of who you are, which is um such a rare, once in the existence of the universe phenomenon. So to try and flatten that to become something that you're not, or to be like something that already exists, doesn't make any sense, because A, you'll just be a poor replica of something that already exists, and B, you're already behind the curve because you're trying to be like what you think someone else is, but it's almost just a snapshot because they're already still growing. You know what I mean? So like if I'm trying to be like Anisha today, from what I see right now, like there are processes already going on that you're Anisha, future Anisha 5 months from now is being born, and I'm not aware of it because I'm trying to catch up. In Watchmen, there's this great monologue about old photographs, and Dr. Manhattan staring off into this. So it's a for those listening, Watchmen, if they're unfamiliar, it's a graphic novel by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. And the Dr. Manhattan is looking off into space, and he's contemplating the universe, and he thinks about stars, and stars are like old photographs, because by the time we see them here on Earth, by the time the light reaches us, that star may have like imploded or exploded, millennia ago, and we're just catching this old light. It's only just arriving on our retinas or what have you. But what's going on with Finn? It happened long ago.
Oh my gosh, and you're right because, just being your true self and individual self, even if you're, you know, when you're in middle grades or when you're younger, sometimes being different or quirky, you may get
Hmm.
made fun of, right? And you might think, "Ugh, I need to be this type of person, right? Instead of just being my authentic self." But it's so
Yeah, I had a
important.
friend that very much so. I remember I had a friend. It was really funny. It was three of us who were pretty, we were into kind of like nerdy things, we're in the comics and art and so on and so forth. And I remember one day he came and we were all sitting around. He was like, "All right, fellas, I've decided." And we're like, "Well, what are you talking about? What did you decide?" He's like, "I'm going to be a thug." And we're like, "What?" He was like, "Yeah, I'm going to be a thug." I was like, "How are you going to accomplish that?" And he was like, he had a whole plan, right? Like in a very nerdy way. He like laid out his plan. "I'm going to get some tattoos. I'm going to do this and that." And of course, he couldn't get tattoos because we were underage. So he like He gave himself a prison tattoo. It was wild. So I think about that in terms of someone trying to be something that they're not. And then,
Mhm.
of course, like, grass cracking its way through a sidewalk, like over time, no matter how many layers of concrete you try and layer on top of your true authentic self, is going to bust through. So
Absolutely.
might as well just clear a space for it and let.
Exactly. Just let it, just, you hear that, readers? Just be your true self. Just embrace it. Your characters represent various experiences and backgrounds. How do you approach creating relatable characters for young readers?
I just kind of think about how I would feel in that situation and how it's really interesting. When I was I feel a lot in many ways, a lot now like I did when I was a kid. Now I don't speak that way and have better tools on how to manage certain things, but the actual feeling inside is really kind of close, which is really interesting. I thought, when you get older, because what we see is how people behave on the outside. So adults behave in a much more reserved manner, and they speak in a certain way. But what happens on the inside is like you'll still get that same flush of feeling that you had then, but then other things come in and go, okay, well, don't say that, and maybe you're hungry, maybe and then the other things jump in and kind of short circuit it. So when I write, I try and write from that place if I didn't have the governor on top, kind of regulating things. And then once I have it there, if it's true, then I'll go back in and go, okay, well, when I was a kid, I did have a governor of a kind, but it wasn't exactly as sophisticated or as well practiced as the one I have now. But I had something. Okay, like how would Zanzi see what would be what would Zanzi hold back on and go, I'm not going to say that. And what would Zanzi go like, you know what? You're destroying our camp and I'm going to let you know it. So I just try to be true. I try to be true to how I would feel and how I think the characters would feel in that moment. I try not to, at the beginning when you're writing, you put words in their mouths because you need to get things going. But
Hmm.
over time, you spend enough time with them that they start telling you what they want to say. Or you'll try and put words in their mouth and they'll reject it and they just won't say it. And then you just have to honor that. And that's when it gets really fun.
What advice would you give young writers or artists who dream of creating their own graphic novels?
I would say begin right now. You don't need permission to do it. Part of the reason why I do graphic novels in the first place is when I was in high school, I was in a TV production program where we were working on making, learning how to make TV, like and stuff. And it was really fun. And I'm a visual storyteller, so it was like right up my alley. But at a certain point, I came to a crossroads where I had to choose between comics and that. I remember thinking that comics was the better choice because it was when I was a kid, I was like, how am I gonna convince people to give me millions of dollars to make this, epic sci-fi thing? But with comics, all I needed was a pen, paper, and the power of my imagination, a little bit of time, and I could do it. I could do a space opera. I could do a space epic, which I did. I did a comic called Tartarus with Jack Cola and Andrew Cronky. Just this thing is epic, right? But it didn't take millions of dollars. It just took a bunch of guys just working hard and applying some imagination and creativity. So I would say that if you want to do it, just start doing it. And in high school, I would make stories just to entertain my friends, and we would compete with each other and make characters that would kill each other and this and that. And I was doing it for laughs, but little did I know I was developing my craft and developing how to tell a story, how to entertain an audience. Because then, like some of our friends who weren't um in on drawing the stuff with like, hey, when are you gonna do the next blah blah blah? You got another one coming, and you'd see what they would respond to and what they wouldn't. Um, yeah, and just have fun with it, I would say. Just start right away.
If you could step into any video game for a day, which would it be and why?
It would be it would be one of the Zeldas.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, those are so man, they captured my imagination like you would not believe as a kid. And even now when like I said, I don't play anymore, but whenever I kind of like peek over someone's shoulder and I and I like watch what's going on, I'm like, oh my goodness, I need to get back in the game. I love how expansive. I love the lore. I love the character design. I love that Link's sword shoots little like blasts. That's really interesting. Like I like everything about it. I like the Triforce. I like everything about the design and the language to describe the design, and even like, currency of the rupee, which is an actual currency in our world, but like they could have called it anything, but they called it a rupee. That's kind of cool. Yeah, it would be Zelda.
Nice.
Pick
Excellent.
anyone. I'll jump right on in there.
And there's so many variations of, the Zelda as well. When I started playing, it was like what 1990. So I was playing with the first Nintendo, and now look at
Hmm.
how it is. So yes, that's I like that.
Hmm.
If you could collaborate with any author or illustrator, past or present, who would it be and why?
Wow, man, boy, that's a big one. And my mind is racing all over the place because I'm thinking about the people who I respect and admire, but I don't even know if I'd want to collaborate with them or just want more stuff from them. Like Jaime Hernandez would be like way up there, but I don't know if I like. I would just like. I would just. My collaboration with Jaime would be me just like reading the pages that he makes and staring at them. Oh, this is cool. Maybe Oh, since I mentioned Alan Moore, maybe Alan Moore. Like hunker down with Alan Moore and like try and like cook up something for a number of years and then like make this a mad masterpiece or something like that. That'd be really cool.
Anything in the works that's coming up, Johnny, you want to share with our
Yeah,
listeners?
absolutely. I'm working on a new middle grade graphic novel. It's about basketball. That's what I'll say for right now. And I'm having a really great time with it. A lot of great team dynamic stuff, which is really fun that I miss working on from Swim Team, where you have like a whole team trying to gel and work together. So I've got all of those dynamics. I've got all the action of probably my favorite sport, basketball, and so I'm in the thumbnail phase right now. So it's fun because I've been scripting, and now I'm starting to see, at least in thumbnail form, the visuals come together and seeing how the characters move, which is interesting because I could describe it and I could kind of feel how they move, but when I see it, then it's like, all right, okay, even for me, the writer, like it's every stage is a different stage of discovery. So yeah, so keep a lookout for that. Hopefully, I'll be drawing it this year and then hopefully out next year.
This is awesome. This is so great. Well, Johnny, I want to thank you for joining me and reading in the middle. And listeners, get ready for some more of graphic novels coming your way with Mr. Johnny Christmas. Thank you again. And we look forward to everything that you're doing. And also, listeners, like I said, go and run out there, go to your library, go to your bookstore, and grab Swim Team and Gamerville. You will not be disappointed. Thank you, Johnny.
Okay, thanks so much, Anisha.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Reading in the Middle. A huge thank you to Johnny Christmas for joining me and sharing his incredible journey, creative insights, and the stories behind his amazing work like Swim Team and Gamerville. His passion for storytelling and inspiring young readers is truly remarkable. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your fellow middle grade enthusiasts. Don't forget to follow me, Anisha Jeffries, on social media for updates on upcoming episodes, author interviews, and all things middle grade. Until next time, keep reading, keep dreaming, and keep celebrating the magic of middle grade books. See you soon on Reading in the Middle. Bye.